the notes off to the side here. Okay, so basically what I wanted to cover today was more or less, it's a prequel to some of the stuff that we're going to do later on. And in order for everybody to be able to participate in the items later, we needed an environment that we can work in that has multiple machines, has both Windows and Linux. And that's not really practical to do, obviously, if you're going to use real equipment. So I thought we would just use a virtual network and something that's free, except for the Windows licenses, that we can all set up at home reasonably easily, have the machines talk to one another in this virtual network. And it can also still be relatively safe because we can isolate the machines away from the real physical network cards and the computers, so that if somebody was like hitting this laptop right now, they wouldn't actually see the virtual machines. So to get started, we need a virtual environment. And there's a few of them really that are really good. I think there's one called Perilous or something like that. It runs on Mac though, so that may not be for everybody. There's one called VMware Player, which comes from the same company with the same name that makes all the big ESX stuff and all that. And that one's good, but the player is limited. It's, I believe it cannot take snapshots if I'm not mistaken, and there's a couple of other features that it can't do. You can get those features, you can buy the VMware Workstation edition, but that is a licensed product that you have to pay for. And it has a lot of features in it, and it's really well suited for professional environments as well. Then there's Oracle Virtualbox, and Virtualbox doesn't have quite as many features as the VMware products, but it has the advantage of it doesn't cost anything. So for home use, it's no charge at all. And so Oracle Virtualbox looks something like this. It used to be Sun Virtualbox, but of course Sun got acquired, right? So it's Oracle Virtualbox now. And the current version, I believe, is not 12. Let's make sure. So it's 4.1.12. And there's some revision number, but that's not so important. I've pretty well noticed that when they release new updates, they always change the version number, and it seems they use even numbers, 12, 14, or whatever, so they're probably using the odd numbers for their development versions. So you can download that, just Google, obviously VirtualBox, download, you can grab it off their website pretty easily. If you're running Windows, just be careful to get the Windows version, and it comes as a self-installing EXE or MSI or something along those lines. Real straightforward. And of course, if you have Linux, then you know to get the Linux version. So the next step would be, once we get this Oracle VirtualBox installed, is to kind of understand how it works. And it creates these virtual pieces of hardware. So like virtual network cards and virtual disks, so that when you install an operating system into VirtualBox, the operating system truly believes it's running on a physical piece of hardware. When it makes a call to these virtual hardware devices, they listen and respond just the same way as a physical device would listen and respond. So the operating system doesn't understand that it's not on a physical piece of equipment, nor does it really care. Operating systems work on the same principle as most any other piece of software. They make requests, put information in places, and get responses. And as long as it all works, they're perfectly happy. So the first thing we do is look at how to get an operating system onto VirtualBox. So there's a new button here. That's how you start new machines up. Then the settings are controlled from the settings icon, or you can right-click on an existing machine and use the settings icon. And show is just basically like play. I don't know if they couldn't say play because VMware Player says play, or they just want to be different, but it's show. So to create a new virtual machine, let's go to the new virtual machine wizard, and then hit next, and then you have to give your virtual machine a name. So let's just say that we're going to install a copy of Samurai Linux. I've already got one installed here. We'll just go through the process and then cancel at the very end to simulate the one that I installed here. Well, the first thing I'd have to do is I have to get the operating system. If you want to install Windows, for example, you need a Windows disk. If you want to install Linux, you need a disk, or you can use an ISO. So to get Samurai, I went to Kevin Johnson's site, or maybe it's in Guardians, and downloaded a copy, and along with an awesome song from Amazon. So we got, I don't know what possessed me that day to get that song. It was funny. Boy, wasn't that good when I listened to it either. Karate Kid moment. Let's see. So samurai099.iso, and I got that from the InGuardians website. Downloaded to my machine. Pretty straightforward. An ISO is just it's like a CD-ROM or DVD image, but it's that you can burn bit for bit to a disk, but you don't need to put it on the disk to install a Virtualbox. You can install it directly from the ISO. You could make a DVD out of that if you wanted. All right, so we downloaded that, and remember we're going to call it Samurai, and it was Web Testing Framework, and it's version 0.99. So I'm usually pretty particular about the names I use because you may have different versions on the same laptop. I don't know if you can see that okay. All right, and the operating system in this case is Linux, and it turns out that Samurai is an Ubuntu distribution, so we'll just leave that as the default Ubuntu. If you're not sure what distribution a Linux is, it'll usually say on the website. If you're really not sure, there's a website dedicated entirely to just Linux distributions. You can Google it, but it's something like linuxdistros.org or something like that. And if you're really confused, you can go to linuxquestions.org. I like that site because even if the question is
DistroWatch is really good.
Yeah, DistroWatch. Yeah, that's a really good. Matter of fact, they've been around for forever, right? So they got history going back for years and years and years. So Linux questions, I kind of like that site because you can ask a question that's relatively rudimentary, and you'll actually get the right answer back instead of just a bunch of people telling you to try harder and stuff. You know? So, it's a little annoying after a while. So, you got to start somewhere, right? So try to help people out a little bit, as long as they don't keep asking the same question over and over. So you got to give your virtual machine some memory. Usually the recommendations are pretty good unless you're going to do something special with that machine. So for example, for most Linuxes, it's going to suggest 512 megabytes. And one thing you need to understand about the virtual machine memory is, yes, it is virtualized, like the operating system believes it's talking to this virtual hardware. However, this is literally mapped to the real RAM. So this is one of those cases where the virtual machine memory maps to the real world, and you really will chew up 512 megabytes in this case of real memory on your actual machine, your host. So you have to account for that. If you try to put 8 gigs of RAM on your virtual machine, and you got 4 in your laptop, you will crash the system because you will basically use up all the RAM. Bad things will happen. I believe it throws a warning. See if I can get it to do that. Maybe if I just slide this way over here or something.
Or maybe I'll thrash out to the hard drive a whole lot.
Yeah. There's also a bit of overhead too on top of whatever you allocate.
That's true. And your host is going to use whatever it needs to do its job. So there's all kinds of other things to account for. I know VMware throws stern warnings if you get like over half or something. So I don't know if this will. I don't know. I didn't say anything, so I guess that's what you get for free. But anyway, control yourself on that. So startup disk, virtual hard disk. So we need to create a virtual hard disk. Now this one doesn't actually exactly map. So if you create a 16 gigabyte virtual hard disk for your virtual machine, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to take up 16 on the physical disk. So let's say create new disk, and we're just going to take the defaults on everything. Create new disk by default, use the VirtualBox disk image by default. Note that I believe this VMDK is a little, you can trade it with other virtual machines a little easier. So I believe that's the
It's
format.
VMware format.
VMware format. So you can move around. And if you notice this last one down here, if you're kind of a Mac person, there's this parallel hard disk at the bottom, so you can interchange it. But we're going to stick with the defaults as far as this series goes. Dynamically allocated means that it'll allocate a big chunk, and then when that chunk gets used up, it'll take a little bit more all the way up to the max. So if you said go up to 16 gigs, it might only take 4 to start, and then it'll grow as needed in chunks. If you say fixed size, then you're just going to like allocate the whole block right up front. So I usually go dynamically. I don't see any reason to take up more space. I'm sure performance-wise, it'd be better to use fixed. And then finally, we're going to do, for this virtual disk creation, we're going to say what its name is, and we're going to say where to store it and how much to use. It's going to recommend 8 gigs for Linux by default. I usually change that to at least 10, and if you're going to do something special with the virtual machine, I like to have about 16. Seems like that's a pretty good sweet spot. And nowadays, 16 gigs on most laptops is no big deal, so just feel free to crank it up to whatever. All right. And then finally, you would say create, and I'm going to hit cancel instead. But it would create the hard disk, and then you would. Well, actually, I should have went ahead and probably punched that through. Delete me. Okay, just so we can see the next screen. Okay, then it would create the machine, and that way you can see it pop up here. So I'm going to delete this machine. Or actually, let's go ahead and work with this machine. I'll delete it later. That way we can use one that's raw when setting up the networking and so forth.
This one's got the RAM too high though?
Yeah, it does. I'm not going to start it.
Okay.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
So we did the installation, and let's do the networks next. Okay, so we're going to go to settings. Actually, I'll just fix the RAM here in just 1 second. Hey, there it is. There's the warning finally.
Yes.
All right. So let me see if I have. Zoom it. Go ahead and run that. Zoom is a free app that lets you Zoom. So there you go. Plus you can draw pictures and stuff. Let's see, I think it's like draw and stuff like that. So you can do these kind of things. So anyway, I'm gonna use it for the zooming here. Okay, so we could actually change the operating system and version if somehow that had got messed up. If we go to, so we're under the general tab here, and we're going to go into the advanced. You can change where the snapshots are stored, set the clipboard so that you can copy information from your host to your guest operating system and back. That's really useful. And personally, I like to have the banner, the virtual machine banner that shows at the top of the screen. So let me show you that real quick. Switch over to a virtual machine I got running. See the banner, the control banner that sets it at the top? Because and especially in Windows, but even in the newer Linuxes, you'll spend a lot of time on the taskbar, and if you leave it at the default, it'll keep popping that thing up over top of your mouse. So very irritating. Tip for that, you can give it a description if you want. All right, under System tab, this is where you can change the memory around. Now, of course, you can't change it if it's already running, but so if you come in here when the machine's running, it's probably all going to be grayed out or something like that, or it won't save or whatever. Just turn the machine off and change the settings and then turn it back on. And you can change the boot order. So this could be important because if you don't have a real live floppy to boot from, you might want to just uncheck that. My laptop doesn't even have a floppy. CD-ROM is where you can set it to boot from first, and then hard disk second is probably the best way to do it. And then I like to enable the I/O API-C. It helps some machines run more stable, although it can slow them down a little bit. I've never really noticed the slowdown though. Here you can set up how many CPUs you want to give the machine, and the execution cap. I actually do use this execution cap sometimes on when I'm using a virtual machine that I'm developing on, that I'm running something like Eclipse on that's very resource intensive. I'll actually cap the execution at like say 90 or 95%, and that way the virtual machine can't run away. use up the full CPU allotted to it. And then acceleration's already set. I would just leave that default unless you have a reason not to. So under the display tab, we have video. I generally go ahead and give it the max, which is 128, and enable 3D, but not 2D acceleration. It's not going to hurt if you don't do it, but even Linux now is using a lot of video for the GUIs and stuff, that much more so than it used to. And Windows has always used a ton of it, so you got remote display. I generally ignore that. Storage is where you can change all those hard disks, or you can add in a new hard disk, or you could add in a new CD-ROM or a floppy or any other, pretty much any other device that's externally attached. And here's the disk that we had created earlier, so it's still sitting there. Tells you the specifications on it. So it's right now its actual size is 36 kilobytes, and the virtual size is 8 gigabytes. And the reason that there's a discrepancy is because I set it to dynamically allocate the storage. So it'll take up more space as the virtual machine grows up to 8, and then it'll run out. Now, I don't know of a way to increase this maximum limit here. I tried doing that and it didn't work. Maybe somebody out there,
You have to use a command line.
command line to do it,
Yeah.
and it works?
Kind of.
Kind of? Okay. That's kind of what it
Well,
was.
I screwed the image. I was messing with it, made it bigger than the hard drive I had, and caused problems.
Okay.
But it supposedly works.
I've resized using the command line tools. It screws up. It can screw up the OS image. It doesn't always.
Yeah.
It doesn't always put the disk image in a place that makes sense on the new disk size.
Okay.
So you usually have to go in with like a gparted and clean it up.
So it may not respect the boundaries of the virtual operating system, boot sector.
It's been a few years since I played with Virtualbox's command line tool, but it was very literal. And if you didn't give it exact numbers on the command line switches, it would, if you tried to let it go, it wouldn't do a very good job.
Okay. Well, it's good to know.
I've never had any luck getting that to work.
I haven't either, so I'll just give you that warning right now. Maybe if you want to avoid what sounds like some pain anyway, allocate enough storage up front. And just know that if you set it dynamically, even if you set it too high, you probably aren't really going to take up that much space. So it'd be interesting to see if you had like a Linux and you did a command that actually touched the entire disk. Would it actually expand the disk out or not?
But you
the
can
shred
also,
command.
if you do like a defrag, like on more of a Windows, you can actually shrink the dynamic partition back down.
You can? Okay. And if you do like a shred on Linux, will it like span it all out as the shred tries to wipe every single little bit?
It will.
Yeah. So it'll probably, that's kind of neat.
Yeah, generally what they tell you to do is to zero out the drive if you're going to shrink it so that it knows what to shrink.
Okay.
A lot of times if you install the tools package for VirtualBox or VMware, it really assists the operating system in what it writes out to disk with regard to the dynamic as well.
Okay. All right. So we might even look at that later. Storage we pretty much covered. Audio I don't really mess with. The default audio seems to work fine. Network. This is the part that's really going to mess with you. So if you're not used to virtual machines. So we have physical cards in the laptop, right, in the host. Whatever your host is, desktop, whatever. And in my case, let's see, was it ncpa.cpl? I always get that mixed up. Nope, that wasn't it. Network and sharing. There we go. Such a joy in Windows 7 to learn all the new GUI ways. Let's see. So this host right here, it physically has a network Ethernet card in it, okay, and it has a wireless radio in it. Additionally, I have plugged in via USB with the appropriate drivers on the host. I've plugged in this external wireless network card, which is right, let's see, it's this one here. And And then you'll notice that Virtualbox installed a virtual network card that isn't really on the physical host, called the Virtualbox HostOnly network. So that all of this is going to be important here to kind of keep in mind of what's physically on this box and what's virtually on this virtual network card. Now the virtual network card does not really exist. It's a software network card. Just keep that in mind for just a second. So if we go back over, let's see here, to the virtual machine. There we go. Under the network tabs, we can enable the virtual machine to connect to both these virtual cards and these physical cards, and there's going to have different consequences for doing that. The easiest one is the NATed connection. That one's automatically set up. And that'll cause the Virtualbox to essentially act as a NATing device to the physical network cards. And that one's more or less auto-magic. The IP address you're going to get in your virtual machine from that card is going to be like a 10 dot something or another. And you can browse the internet and from your virtual machine through your real physical cards and all that through the NATed device. Of course, what the servers on the internet are going to see is your physical card's MAC address and your physical IP address, but virtual machine will translate that over into the 10 dot when it comes back. Okay. I generally don't use the NATed as much when doing a lot of testing. I generally use this bridged adapter. And in the bridged adapter, let's see if I can get this to focus. Hey, there we go. That worked. What this will do is it'll connect your virtual machine and give it direct access, essentially, to the physical network card on the host. And what's make it even more confusing is the physical host will have access to the physical network card too. So if that's not confusing enough, we'll talk about HostOnly in a second. But essentially, the way that it works is that Virtualbox has kind of grabbed a hold of the physical network card and it's letting the virtual machine communicate through it. And so how is this an advantage over the NATed? Well, the Virtualbox host will actually be able to place that physical network card into like promiscuous mode and to do scanning and things like that. Also, the host and the guest operating system can talk to one another through that interface. So, oops, sorry about that. So the point of the drop-down box here is we saw that there were like 5 cards on this host, but only 3 of them are coming up in the list because in bridged mode you have to bridge to a physical device, a physical network card. Now, notice I can bridge to the wireless card. There's no problem with that. That is a physical device, and I can also bridge to the Ethernet. But sometimes, like if I'm at home, I might be connected to an Ethernet and be bridged to the wireless and be like, well, how come nothing's working? So
Doesn't OS 10, is it still a problem sometimes with bridging to the wireless one?
not that I know of. It works well. So I'm using a reasonably new laptop with Windows 7 with the newest version of Virtualbox and bridging it to the wireless.
I thought it says OS 10 specific though.
Card.
That I had a problem.
What is it now?
OS 10.
Oh yeah, I have no experience with OS 10 at all, so yeah, maybe in that case, Virtualbox doesn't run very well.
I've had a lot of problems moving Wi-Fi cords directly to that.
Okay,
I think it depends on the card.
I think maybe it does.
It's always worked fine for parallels. I don't know about,
Yeah,
I always have avoided VirtualBox.
one of the reasons I got this laptop is because the wireless card in it is very compatible with a lot of different kinds of tools, not just Virtualbox, but it's compatible, like with Kismet and things like that. And so I kind of made sure, I was going to have a good card for that type of work before I got the laptop. It could have something to do with that. The Toshibas, they come with the Atheros wireless network cards, and they work really well with all the tool sets too. But outside of the Toshibas with the Atheros and this is a Dell with the Intel, I'm not sure if all bets are off. So, but anyway, you can bridge directly with it. And if the bridge doesn't work, try NATed, because usually NATed will work. All right, so we've got that. All right, the third type of adapter is the host only. So if we go back over here to the physical host, a new virtual card was installed, a software network card was installed by Virtualbox, and it's the Virtualbox host only network card. Now from Windows point of view, it's as real as anything else. You can right click on it, click properties, and it's got all the drivers installed. It doesn't have the bridge network driver installed because it's a host only. You can go in and drill down on the properties and set your IP address. Now by default, you'll notice that the Virtualbox gives this adapter 192.168.56.1, and it's kind of important to note that because if you're doing like an nmap of a host-only network, you're going to see some machine come up on .1. Okay, what in the world is that? Well, it's this virtual card. It's this virtual device. Now this is the default. This 192.168.56 is the default. It's the /24 network, meaning that only the last number changes. Okay, so what is a host-only network? Well, it's kind of what it sounds like. Let's say we've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We got 7 virtual machines running here. I'm going to delete the 8th one. And what if we wanted all those machines to be able to see each other and talk to one another and communicate with each other and have like a web server running on one and have the browser on another, browse to and all that. But you don't want to actually have anybody from outside the laptop be able to connect into those virtual machines. Well, you can use the host-only network, and as you add these machines to this host-only network, they can all see one another, but they can't. The connections from outside the laptop can't get to them. It's not a real card, right? It's just implemented in software. So there's no physical port on this laptop that's physically connected to that host-only adapter. All right, so the name of the network, you don't get to choose it. If you choose host-only adapter, then it makes you pick that card. That's the only virtual software card in the machine that's a host-only adapter. And you can do the advanced, and you can allow the virtual machines to set the card into promiscuous mode, which is going to be important if you're going to use tools that require that. Okay, so let me stop here for a second. Is there any questions about setting up the networking? That part is usually what messes with people. They can't get the machines talking to one another, and then they can't use nmap, and they can't do scans and stuff, and that's what messes people up. Okay. All right, so if we look at, say, this Backtrack machine, we can see that it's got a host-only adapter, so it's going to be able to talk to the other machines, but it's also got the bridged adapter. And if you're going to do some testing and stuff, and you might be testing some dangerous software or whatever, and you're thinking, well, I don't really want the machine to be able to get out to the internet. So while the machine's off, you can go into the settings, go down to network, find the card, the adapter, and then uncheck enable network adapter, and that's the same thing as basically unplugging it. Virtually speaking, it's the same as unplugging it. And the reason I have Backtrack with both of those cards enabled is I wanted to be able to talk to the machines on the network for scanning purposes, but also I want to be able to get updates from the internet for Metasploit, because you run MSF update and all that kind of stuff, so get all the updates, apt-get. It's not going to work too good if you can't get to the internet. Okay, that covers the networking. All right, USB devices. So most of the devices in the VirtualBox are virtualized, meaning they're not really there. The VirtualBox software listens to the guest operating systems, give commands to controllers and things, and it translates that into calls into the host to take care of it. In the meantime, the guest operating system is none the wiser. However, USB is different. USB physically tunnels through, I guess is the best way to put it, the VirtualBox and connects directly to the guest operating system. So this Backtrack installation on here is just running on top of VirtualBox. It's just an operating system running on top of a program that acts like it's a computer. However, when I plug in this physical USB device, I have to choose whether it's connected to the Windows 7 host or is it connected to the Backtrack guest. Because since it physically is mapped to whichever machine is using it, you can't use both. And that's where this devices tab comes in. If you look at the USB adapters, I've actually gone in here and clicked on the RA link, 802.11n USB device, and chosen to connect it physically to the Backtrack guest. Which means if I go back to Windows, even though earlier while we were setting up, even though this card was recognized by Windows just fine, it's not anymore. Windows no longer can see or can use this USB device anymore. So USB is special. That means if you plug a USB thumb drive or whatever into your host so that you can copy files to your guest operating system, when you plug it into the host, your host operating system, in this case Windows 7, is going to grab that USB device, right? You're not going to be able to see it in your virtual machine. So you're going to have to go into the virtual machine and you're going to have to go up to devices and find the USB device in this list, and you're going to have to click on that device to take control away from the host operating system and give the USB device to the guest. And while it's plugged into the guest, you're not going to be able to see it in the host. In effect, you can actually copy files back and forth from a USB device between the guest and the host using USB just by controlling which one is controlling it at the moment, which comes in handy. But the reason I'm really showing this to you is because I need to make sure you understand about wireless. So in the virtual machine, we noticed that we could bridge to the wireless card in the host. However, that guest operating system will not see it as a wireless card, as a radio. It'll see it as an Ethernet device. So you're thinking, well, how am I going to use Kismet in the guest operating system when Backtrack is going to think that's an Ethernet card? Well, the way you can get around all that is you can use a USB network card. Remember I said USB physically maps into the guest, right, as a literal device. The guest sees it as it really is in real life. It's not virtualized as much as the other devices. So this card here, this is an oldie but a goodie. This is the Alpha Networks card. It's the G version. I saw somebody last week that had the N version, and I was jealous. So it's really cool looking. It's all gray, looks deep. So these Alpha cards, though, the chips in them are really highly compatible with the tools at Backtrack. So I tend to try to get those chips or the ones with the Atheros chips in them. I'm not even sure, maybe the Alpha has the Atheros chip in it. Maybe that's why it works.
I want it's 8187L or something
Yeah,
like that.
it's one of the real tech chips.
I know sometimes you can find cheap ones on Deal Extreme, but then again, sometimes you order from Deal Extreme and they're like $20 or so, $15 for a decent Wi-Fi adapter. But then you find out they changed the chipset in it between revisions.
Okay.
But you can actually find really cheap ones that have that chipset if you hunt around.
Yeah, is that the one that the Atheros uses too, or you're saying
No,
just
Atheros
the
has
Alpha?
its own. Atheros has its own chip. Is its own chipset.
Is its own? Okay, great, thanks.
This is an 81 there.
51 of those.
That'd bring my
Not got the other one.
Okay. Well, the part number on this one that I know for a fact works is the model number is the AWUS 036NH.
51 NH does ABGN. I haven't had any trouble.
What? Yours is the AWUS
AWUS 051NH.
051NH.
And it
So we
does-
have an 036NH and an 051NH, and it seems like we're having really good luck with those models. It's whatever's cheaper, right?
Yeah, they're all-
This one here was a pretty good price. It's the older in technology. Works fine. I haven't had any problem with it. And you can get the connector on these two. This connector they use is a standard connector, so you can get longer antennas for it and stuff like that, which is nice. Yeah. Because remember, these antennas are generally speaking, you know, the longer the antenna, the better the reception. Now you have to remember these are, people think of these things like radiating a sphere pattern. They don't. It's like, I don't know, like a donut. It's
Like a
probably-
donut, yeah.
Yeah, like, yeah, our resident radio expert in Louisville can explain it. But so, but basically, I guess if you tilt them around and stuff, you can pick up signals from like up on a 12th floor or something, right? If you kind of hold it like this and you kind of point it at, if you think of
Yeah,
it, if you think of it as being a tangent to the cart. So
Is that
They're using-
Yeah, it's omnidirectional. Yeah.
Omni,
Even though they're omni, they tend to be like a front and a back side. So there tends to be a direction that's stronger pointing in one direction.
yeah, because there's two wire. I think there's two wires in the antenna, right? There's like a loop of wire or whatever. So I guess you can kind of think of that wire being in a plane, and you can turn it on, kind of stuff.
So we're all, yeah.
Let's see if I have an example. There you go. If this isn't working, switch to this one.
But yours is trackable.
This is the Alpha brand range extender, and
But it was so directional.
it actually came with the card and the little suction cup holder gizmo on there as a package from Amazon. I'm sure other retailers have it too. It's just where I have to use it. So again, the point is that your guest is virtualizing all the network cards, and they all look like Ethernet cards, even if they're radio cards. So you can't actually connect them to the one in the laptop, but we can still get Wi-Fi on a guest by using a USB device, because USB is taken literally and passed through to the guest as a real piece of hardware. That's the only real piece of hardware I know that the guest can interact with directly. I don't think there's any way to get, I mean, unless it's a USB hard drive or something, I don't think you can interact directly with the hardware. It has to be through the USB. It's really great.
VMware Workstation has some stuff where they can map physical partitions, and Virtualbox does too, but again, you're going down the command line to do that.
Okay.
But other than that,
So there's nothing in the graphical interface that we're using the more.
not in VirtualBox. VMware Workstation has some stuff for doing that where you
Okay.
can.
And that's
like,
about,
got one of those PCI SD card readers or something, you can map them in or give it a physical drive for doing forensics.
is that like $50, $60?
I think it's more like 100.
More like 100 now? It's been a while. It's been a while since I looked. At some point a long time ago, it was like $50 or $60, and I was like, Virtualbox.
Then Parallels is
Okay, so we worked on how to install Linux already. Windows installation is basically the same way. The difference is you're going to have a disk. So you're not going to have an ISO unless you copied it from a disk. Unless you have like a Technic subscription or something where you can get ISOs, I guess. So you're gonna physically put the disk into the CD drive, and then you're gonna build your new Windows machine and all that stuff. And then when you hit start for the very first time, what's going to happen is VirtualBox is going to say, hey, this is the first time. It's first time run wizard. First time you've ever started this machine. There's no operating system. And you'll need to point it to the D drive or the E drive or whatever your CD-ROM tray is, and tell it, hey, the installation is over here. Now from that point forward, it's a normal Windows installation. It'll look exactly like every other Windows installation you've ever done. Goes through all the same steps. But that initial first step, you got to be sure you point the guest operating, the guest machine, it's not an operating system at that point, to the physical D drive or whatever. Get it installed. And then you have with all these machines installed after a day of aggressive installation. Now the nice thing about virtual machines is if your host has enough power, you can install like 3 of them at the same time. So they're all running side by side by side, right? And that works really good for these old boxes like this Windows 2000 server and Metasploitable and stuff, because they're small footprint operating systems, so they don't take up a lot of resources, relatively speaking. All right, so now we got all these machines installed. Yay. And next we're going to look at installing Matilda. So we're going to need this machine here, which is Samurai. Start that one running. Let's see the startup sequence. So it goes into the normal everyday startup sequence. And we're gonna need this machine here. Maybe I should revert to snapshot. I took this to Sands last week on the, where they were running all the capture the flags and stuff. Like a little nervous about this machine. I wanted to show some of the people there how Matilde was coming along, because they use it for their classes. So I've got Backtrack running. It was the one we were all looking at earlier. And then we've got Samurai starting up. Samurai is a kind of Linux. It was created by, I think, several people from InGuardians. I think Kevin Johnson was the project leader on it, and if I'm not mistaken. And they built it as a operating system that has all the web testing tools already pre-installed, ready to go. And he uses it professionally. It's got an astounding number of tools on it. And he also has a bunch of web servers running on it that have vulnerabilities put into them on purpose, so that you can use the tools that are on the Samurai to attack the web servers that are running on Samurai, and it's all running all on localhost. So it's all perfectly ethical and, you know, no problem. So it's a great way to practice. And then here's Windows over here starting up. So, oh, sorry, it's already started up. I hadn't clicked on it yet. Alright, so we'll let Windows start. While we're waiting for all these operating systems to, never mind, started. Okay. Alright, so let's go check our network settings real quick. Let's see what this other one is. I think we need 2 of these. Alright, so settings on the Windows XP Matilde machine. Networking. Do we have host only? We've got NAT and host only. Okay, good. I probably wouldn't want the NAT running while we're doing testing, but I don't have any network connections to this host anyway, so it's not going anywhere. Okay, on the Backtrack, we've got host only running, great. We already checked that earlier. On the Samurai, settings, network, and we've got host only running here. Oh, let's allow that. Okay, and you can kind of, if you click on any particular machine, you can kind of get a summary over here on the right-hand side. You can kind of see, if you can even magnify, it's hard to read, but you can see the adapters that are enabled is 2 and 3, and one of them is a host-only adapter, and the other one is the bridge to the radio in the laptop. Not the USB radio, the radio that's came with the laptop. So in theory, they should all be able to see each other, right? They're all running on that host-only network, and the host-only adapters are all enabled, and the machines are all started up and running and all that jazz. So we go to the Backtrack. Let's see if that indeed is true. Okay, so Backtrack's Ethernet address is 192.168.56.101, but it's also got this this other card running ETH2. So how did I know for sure that this is the one that's running on the host-only network?
Actually got that. It's 56.
It's a 56. Remember we said that by default, the host-only network range is 192.168.56, and then it's a /24 network, right? So it starts at 100. Virtualbox starts at 100 and starts handing out IPs 100, 101. It's a DHCP server. Well, why is it 56? Okay, if you go over to machine settings, let's see, I'm sorry, is it file preferences? I think it's file preferences. If not, we'll punt here in a second. Okay, and you go to network, and there's this host-only adapter. Okay. As you can see, that's where you would set up the IP address range and the network mask. So if you wanted to create this host-only virtual network with 16,000 machines or whatever, just change the network mask. And then here's the DHCP server, and you can turn it off if you want. But by default, you can see that the DHCP server is running, and you can't see, there you go, at 100. And see the lower address bound is 101, that's where it started giving out IPs. If you remember, Backtrack was the first machine we kicked off, and then Windows, and then Samurai. So Windows is probably 102, and Samurai is probably 103, and then it stops at 254. Now, I barely understand that much of how the HTTP works. I'm not going into it any deeper than that, but it's lucky to get that far. Gary has to come up here if there's any questions. So that's how I knew that that card was the host-only network. Okay, Control L. So now that we know that, let's see if we can find our friends on the network. 168.56.102. Okay, 64 bytes from 102 with a time to live of 64. Is that the Windows or the Linux, and how did you know? This question might be worth something. Yeah, time to live 64. So Windows or Linux? Hey, you might just take a shot at it. It's like 50-50, right? You saw me start Samurai, you saw me start Windows, it has to be one or the other. We already know Backtrack's 101.
Yeah.
We know the range is 101 to 254, so we know enough information to know we got a 50% chance. Windows.
Windows. No. Windows.
It's Linux. So it is Linux.
I cheated.
Google's not cheating.
Oh, okay, Google's not cheating.
Actually, you might be right, it might be Windows, I might have backwards, I don't know. We'll find out here in a minute.
I'll just use a map, it'll tell you.
Okay, so 103 and
I'm sure Linux.
101. So I think it is Linux. I don't think it's Windows. Just
Yeah,
so
Windows
you know.
is 128 or 32.
Yeah. So see, the thing is when you're doing reconnaissance, you can find out a lot just from pings or escapee packets. You don't really have to necessarily use Nmap. See, Linuxes tend to have a time to live of 64, and then they go 63, 62, right? And then Windows starts at 128, works its way down. So by fingerprinting the OS stack, you can kind of tell what the machine's doing. Also, did you notice that the 103 didn't respond to ICMP? So that's a Windows XP SP3 box. Remember, ICMP is disabled on Service Pack 3, and it didn't respond. So we probably use like a TCP ping, and we can figure out. We'll find the Windows box. Don't worry. We'll figure it out there. We'll do that in a later class. Can't hide it. So if it's listening, we'll find it. All right. So make sure we're staying on task here. Okay, last step is to install Matilda so that we actually have a web server. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one or two of the machines on the network and we're going to put web servers on them on purpose so that from the other machines we can not only do network reconnaissance, but we can also go against websites, we can go against a database, we can have a little variety in our lab, a few different things to do. And the way you install this is the first thing, I'm just going to run through the steps here because we don't have time to literally install it. It takes a long time to do this. But you're going to download XAMPP, which is spelled like that, XAMPP, C-A-M-P-P. This is assuming this is on Windows again. And you're going to install XAMPP. What's XAMPP? Okay, XAMPP installs Apache MySQL Server, and it does a wonderful job of automatically making it all configured properly to work with each other. And it does a great job of installing them as services so that you can control them in the Windows services. And not to say there's not other products out there, but they really do a nice job. So after you get the XAMPP installation done, yes, Google it. You'll find it. It's at Apache Friends, but you'll figure that out when you Google it. But the website is apachefriends.org or com or something. Yeah, don't just type it in an illy way. Go figure out what the real site is. There's too many instances where somebody's got that off by one going on. Ends up somewhere bad. Okay, let's go to MySQL. So it installed MySQL. Now, take one note on this. Well, maybe two notes. First note is when you're installing XAMPP, it's going to ask you, do you want to install Apache and MySQL as a service? And the answer is definitely yes. Okay. The other note to take is I've got a video already put together that you can go watch on how to install it. So Maybe that's the note we should have started with. So that's at Adrian's site. He has a whole page of nothing but my videos. So that's irongeek.com, like this, irongeek.com. And the YouTube channel, so you just link to the YouTube channel.
Yeah, I just linked it in
But
the
you've got them all.
videos.
You got, so Adrian, so if you know much about YouTube channels, it's really hard to find anything on them. They only show like the first 12 characters of the name of the video or something stupid, so you can't read the title of it. And then they don't organize it very well. They have good search features. So Adrian has them on his site, and he's got the full names of all the videos, I think all the way down to the .mp4, right?
I think I have them, well actually I took off the MP4 and then I took out the dashes and put in spaces and then I did the case.
Oh,
correct,
so you
know.
cleaned it up, like sentence
I
cased
tried,
it?
yeah.
I got you, see sentence cased it.
And I have an index at the top that you can click on to take you down that individual video.
I got you.
And I'll probably be doing it here shortly to where it doesn't try to load the preview image for every single one of the 61 videos that are out there right now.
And the keyword to get to your site is Matilda videos.
Or just search for irongeek.com and it's actually on the front page right now.
Oh,
If you
okay.
go to search for Iron Geek
That's
and
easy.
Utility, it's probably going to be one of the top links.
Okay, so I think maybe we got like, I don't know, 50 whatever videos out there right now. It's close to 60. So it's in that haystack somewhere.
How about this Mutilidae that's already there in the Samurai?
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. In fact, that's what we're going to get to here in just a second.
Oh, okay.
Because, that is a much easier way to install it. Because it's right here. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to upgrade that version to the new version.
Okay.
So, but yep, right on track. So the YouTube channel is spelled like this, WEBPWNIZED. Okay. So if you go to YouTube and then go to that channel, all right, there you go. If you want to copy it. All the videos are there, but like I said, Adrian's site does a much better job of organizing them so you can figure out what you want. And you can watch them from your site, or you can go to YouTube, or you can copy them, or whatever, save them local, do all that.
If you send me the raw MP4s, we can upload them all to archive.org and then you can just download them. Or you can upload them all to archive.org and that way anybody can just download the MP4s directly.
Oh, okay, I see. So they get,
That's why I uploaded all of the cons I've been doing, has been uploading everything to archive.org and embedding on YouTube for you to watch it now, and then they want an archive version, just suck it down.
so you pull down the MP4, and then when you're on the airplane or whatever, you can watch the videos without network connection. So that's a good idea. Okay. And then, so basically the way it works is when I get a new video loaded, if you're subscribed to the channel, obviously, I think it sends you an email or something like that, spams you or whatever. And then and then I'll go out to Twitter and I'll just tweet, video on subject such and such is loaded. Typically I copy Adrian so that he knows that it's ready. And so if you want to look at the Twitter feed, that's the same exact channel, but you got to put the little @ symbol in front of it. And that's the Twitter website, or Twitter, not website, Twitter account that we tweet these out to. The only difference between the two is that on the Twitter account, I also tweet out when new releases of Matilda are ready. So when like 2.1.19 comes out in a couple weeks or whatever, I'll send out a notice there. And that's how on SourceForge Matilda is. All right, so back to the installation. We've got Windows and we got XAMPP installed. And those two services are running, and we've gone through that whole process. And if you need some help, there's an installation guide on Adrian's site that is a PDF that explains step by step in Windows 7 how to install XAMPP. It's got pictures in it. There's a video on YouTube that walks through the PDF file. Plenty of help out there. Get that installed, then you got to install Matilda. Okay, so I always install XAMPP in the root for a number of reasons. Especially if I'm installing on Windows 7, I definitely install it in the root for a number of technical reasons. Because they got a lot more protections in 7. So CXAMPP is where I installed it. And then there's a folder called htdocs. So you can kind of see there's XAMPP and there's htdocs. And htdocs is where you drop your websites. So if you have a website in a folder and you drop that folder, for example, Matilda, that I got off of SourceForge, and you drop it into the htdocs folder, Apache will serve that website So when Matilda, when you download from SourceForge, it's going to be like Matilda 2.118.zip, whatever, you know, big long name. And you unzip it into this htdocs folder, and the only thing inside of that zip file is going to be this folder. And the important stuff is, if you look inside of this folder, is the actual website, but you don't really have to worry about that. It's all self-contained inside of that main root. That's it. Drop it in there and you're done. Almost. When you install the website, there's going to be some errors that the video talks about because the version of the OWASP ES API that is for PHP doesn't necessarily get along with the latest versions of the PHP, whatever version we're on now, the PHP 5.3 or something like that. So there will be some errors at the top of the screen about strict and all that kind of stuff. I think I can show them to you. Maybe that'd be the easiest way to do it. By the way, we're way over on time, so if anybody's got to leave, just won't take any offense. Just head out. Sorry about that. It's taking a lot longer than I anticipated. Oh, sorry. I haven't started Burp Suite, so let's just go to no proxy. Try again. That's one case where trying harder really does work. So, sometimes it does. Usually you have to Google harder. Okay, so anyway, the website's running. And if we go into the file that controls the PHP server, which is really good to know where that is, it's in C, in this case, czamp PHP. And inside of the czamp PHP folder is php.ini. I missed it, didn't I? See, oh, haven't gone far enough. .ini, there it is. You can open it in Notepad. Okay. Inside of here, you want to look for error underscore reporting because that's the configuration variable that PHP uses for how much reporting to do and how verbose to be. And if we go down to the line that has that flag on it, by the way, note that anything that starts with this semicolon is a comment, okay? So the original line that was in here when I first installed it is error reporting equals all and strict. And I commented that out and I changed it to error reporting and all this other mumbo jumbo here that got rid of those strict errors that were displaying under the default install. If that makes sense? Okay, so the errors that would have been up here at the top of the page are gone. And if you're thinking, well, I can't write all that down that fast. Well, if you go down here in Matilda, literally on its own front page, and click on the link, get rid of those pesky PHP errors, it's all right there. So we kind of thought of that.
But you still get 50 emails a day.
Me? I get 0 because I haven't disclosed the address. So, yeah, it's pretty easy to fix. Just follow the instructions, okay? And the installation instructions are included in itself, but of course that's a chicken and the egg problem, so we got the installation instructions copied out to Adrian's site as well. But it kind of explains, you know, all this I just said here in a nutshell. Okay? So you'll have to try to get that working because that'll be one of the more interesting targets. Matilda has at least 42 categories of vulnerabilities built into it already, including some HTML5 stuff. It's got some JSON vulnerabilities built into it, and it comes with instructions. If you click the hints at the top there, it'll tell you what to do. All right, so now let's look at Samurai. And as he already pointed out, it comes pre-installed. So I think you go to Applications and then Samurai Targets. Let's see, Internet. I can find it.
It was in the Firefox bookmarks is where I found it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's been a while since I've used this one. I learned most of the web stuff, I learned it on Samurai, but then because all the networking stuff was already in Backtrack and the web stuff can be added to Backtrack, I kind of consolidated it into Backtrack and haven't used this one in a while. But Samurai is a great place if you're doing web testing to start. This is going to get real annoying. Hang on, let me get these errors out of the way. I think it's trying to go to the internet and it can't. Okay. So Control F is full screen or not full screen. Comes in handy. And it does have to be the right hand control, not the left hand control. You can set that in Virtualbox. Let's see, bookmarks, targets. And so Matilde is one of the targets. And this is version 1.3, and it was written by Adrian. Sitting over here against the wall. So he wrote this one, and then later on we collaborated and came out with a version 2 running on a little bit different platform, but same idea. But it's already installed here. So there's really no installation per se, but when you download the zip, if you come over here into the SVR directory, so it's root SVR, and you do an ls, you'll notice that Matilde is pre-installed. We can download the zip file and bring it into here, and then use the unzip command to unzip matilde.blah-blah.zip. Then what we can do is we can take this copy here of Matilde, and we can rename it like Matilde 1.3, and then we can take the zip file that we got from the internet and rename it Matilde to take over its spot, and then now you'll have the latest version installed. But this is Linux, so be careful about a few things. Remember, you got to set the permissions. When you download something from the internet, it's read-only, right? So you're going to have to change permissions, make sure it's executable. Kmod, so, you know, like Kmod, whatever. Also, you're going to need to make one really important note. The password, the MySQL password for the MySQL running in Matilde by default and in XAMPP is blank. However, in Samurai, the password is Samurai. So if you don't do that, when you go to set up Matilde, it's not going to work. So let's see, let's go into CD Matilde. And I think the file in the 1.3 version was called OpenDB. In the new version, it's in the includes, but yep, OpenDB. So okay, so on, like right here is DB pass. Doesn't look like it's in this file. Do you remember, Adrian? Was it in?
Oh man, it's been a while since I touched it. I think isn't it config.in? It's not.
Yeah, right. Config.in. Thanks. And I think it still is. But see right here, when you copy the one off the internet and you replace this version with a new one, when you come in and look at this file, that password is going to be blank. And you're going to have to physically type in password equals Samurai, or else it won't be able to connect to the MySQL server running on the Samurai Linux, which has a password of Samurai. So the username is still the same, the database is the same, that's all fine. It's just that we use two different passwords. So, okay, so it's a lot of information, and I kind of tried to figure out the other day about how long it should take you all to replicate all this, and it should be a minimum of about 5 hours. It's a lot of work. So if you want to get the full network set up with all these machines, whoops, sudo, password for the Samurai operating system is Samurai, by the way. Everything is Samurai, username Samurai, password Samurai, database is Samurai.
And nothing else, you can email Kevin Johnson and ask him.
Oh yeah, email him anyway, he likes that. So, there you go. I didn't say that, you didn't take that, did you?
It's me saying it, so it's all good.
Oh, okay, so anyway, you have all the information to get it all set up, but it is a lot of work. I don't want to make it sound like it's not a lot of work. But I think it's worth it because you can get everything set up relatively for free, at least if you already own the Windows licenses. That's the part that's going to be tricky. But most people have a copy of Windows. If not, there is this Metasploitable version of Linux you can download for free that has vulnerabilities built into it on purpose that you can use Metasploit with. You can download older versions of any operating system and they're going to have vulnerabilities in them. And it doesn't even really have to be that old. I understand even some of the newer Windows 7 have vulnerabilities in them, and I'm not sure how good the exploits are yet, but they're probably coming pretty soon for that RDP thing. And of course, if you can get a hold of something like a Windows 2000 server, that's just money right there. It's got every possible vulnerability they ever invented. They managed to get it into one operating system. So that was awesome for starting out when you're new and you're just trying to learn and stuff like that. So, of course, now Windows 2008 or something would be a much more worthy target and much more difficult, especially if it's installed correctly. Matter of fact, if Windows 2008 server is installed correctly, I'm not even sure how to get into it. I mean, I guess at that point it's like social engineering to try to get the humans around it. Because if you install it in like server only mode without any GUI or anything, it's pretty tough. I'm sure it's not impenetrable. I learned a long time ago not to say that, but it's pretty good. So, all right, so if you're willing, you can get the network set up, and then next time what we're going to do is we're going to start with reconnaissance, and that's going to be using tools like Nmap, like DNS tools like VIG, tools like Whois to try to figure out what the IP ranges are in the first place. We're not going to skip ahead to the exploits. It's tempting to do that, but one of the things that's really hard about the classes where you start with the exploits and you don't really do any of the upfront homework is not only is it not very realistic, but then when you get home it's hard to replicate the results because you don't even know where to start, and it's because you never started from the start. So we're going to start from the very beginning, work our way up to that. All right, so that's it for this time. I think next time we're just going to say it's going to take an hour because we didn't even get close to 30 minutes.
Good.
Well, then there was that little transition phase of everybody leaving, and
Yeah, maybe next time we
Long
can
way to
smooth
break.
that out a little bit.
I think it's to be expected, at least 5 minutes, you know, to get
Better.
you set up.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Did you write?
No,
Okay.